At 11:47 on Christmas Eve, Lauren Mitchell received a text message from her husband. It was supposed to say he was working late. Instead, it contained a photograph that would destroy everything she thought she knew about her marriage. A hotel mirror, a woman's bare shoulder, her husband's hand where it should never have been. But here is what makes this story different from every other cheating husband drama you have ever heard. Lauren did not cry. She did not scream. She did not call him demanding answers. Instead, she walked into his locked office, found his secret phone, and discovered something far worse than an affair. Her husband was not just a cheater, he was a criminal. And by 4 o'clock Christmas morning, Lauren had vanished into the snow with their newborn twins, leaving behind only her wedding ring and a note that said, "Merry Christmas, Cole. This time you will not find us. What happened next will shock you. But the ending will change how you see everything. Stay with me." The snow had been falling over Manhattan since dusk, soft and silent, wrapping the city in a cold, glittering stillness that made everything feel like a snow globe someone had forgotten to shake. Inside the Whitmore apartment on West 85th Street, Lauren Mitchell sat on the bathroom floor with her back against the cold tile wall, listening to the sound of her own breathing. The twins had finally fallen asleep after 6 hours of fever-induced crying. Her arms still ached from rocking them, her eyes burned from exhaustion. She had not slept in 36 hours, and the world had taken on that hazy, dreamlike quality that comes from running on nothing but adrenaline and black coffee. Her phone buzzed on the counter above her head. Lauren reached up without looking, her fingers finding the familiar shape of the device. She pulled it down and squinted at the screen. A text from Cole, her husband of 4 years, the father of her 8-month-old twins, the man who had promised to be home by 7 for Christmas Eve dinner and had instead sent her a message at 11:47 at night. The text read, "Investor dinner running late, don't wait up." Lauren almost laughed. She almost deleted it and went to bed. She almost did what she had trained herself to do over the past 3 years. Accept the lie, swallow the disappointment, and tell herself that at least he was providing for their family. But then she noticed the attachment, a photograph, sent by accident, clearly, because it was cropped, wrong, and slightly blurry, the kind of image someone takes when they are not paying attention to what their thumb is doing. Lauren tapped on it. The image expanded to fill her screen. It was a hotel mirror. She could see the reflection clearly enough to make out the details that would change everything. There was Cole's hand, the one with the wedding ring she had picked out herself, resting on a bare shoulder. There was blonde hair cascading down a back that did not belong to Lauren. There was the edge of a hotel bed in the background, sheets rumpled, champagne bottle visible on the nightstand. Lauren stared at the photograph for a long time. She waited for the tears to come. She waited for the rage, the screaming, the desperate need to call him and demand an explanation. She waited for something, anything, to rise up inside her and prove that she was still the woman she used to be. Nothing came. Instead, something inside her simply switched off, like a circuit breaker tripping in an old house, protecting the wiring from a surge it could not handle. She stood up slowly, her legs stiff from sitting on the cold floor. She walked out of the bathroom and down the hallway to Cole's home office, the room she had never been invited to enter, the room with the door that was always locked. But Cole had been careless tonight. He had left in a hurry, eager to get to his investor dinner that was not an investor dinner at all. The door was unlocked. Lauren pushed it open and stepped inside. The office smelled like Cole, expensive cologne and leather, and the faint chemical scent of dry cleaning. She had never been allowed in here. He said it was because he needed a space that was just his, a place where he could focus without distractions. She had believed him because believing him was easier than fighting. Now she understood why he had kept her out. The second phone was in the top drawer of his desk, tucked beneath a stack of legal documents. It was an older model, the kind people buy when they want something untraceable. Lauren picked it up and scrolled through the messages. There were hundreds of them, all from the same contact, saved simply as S. The messages painted a picture of an affair that had been going on for at least 18 months. Hotel reservations, weekend trips, jewelry purchases, an apartment lease in Tribeca that Lauren had never known existed. She photographed everything with her own phone, her hands steady, her breathing calm. Document first, she told herself. React later. It was something she had learned in her forensic accounting days, back when she had a career, back when she was someone other than Cole Whitmore's wife. In the bottom drawer, she found the receipts. A Tiffany necklace purchased 3 days ago, a pair of diamond earrings from last month, a weekend at a spa in the Hamptons that Lauren had never been invited to. And then, tucked inside a leather folder, she found the lease agreement for the Tribeca apartment. The tenant's name was listed as Sierra Cole. Lauren stared at that name for a long moment. Sierra Cole. Not a random woman. Someone with his last name. Someone he had already given a piece of his identity. She closed the folder and walked out of the office. The twins were still sleeping in the nursery, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Lauren stood in the doorway and watched them breathe. You know what is funny, she thought to herself, that dry humor surfacing even now. I spent 3 hours making his favorite Christmas dinner. The ham is still in the oven. I should probably turn that off before I burn the house down. She paused. Or maybe I should not. Lauren walked to the kitchen and turned off the oven. Then she pulled 2 suitcases from the hall closet and began to pack, 4 o'clock in the morning on the Christmas day. The city was silent in that particular way that only happens when everyone else in the world is asleep. Snow continued to fall, muffling sounds, softening edges, turning Manhattan into something that almost looked peaceful. Lauren stood in the hallway of her apartment with a diaper bag over each shoulder, a suitcase at her feet, and a car seat in each hand. The twins were bundled inside, still sleeping, their faces soft and untroubled by the chaos that surrounded them. She had packed only what mattered: diapers, formula, a change of clothes for herself. The folder of evidence she had photographed and printed, tucked safely inside a waterproof bag. Her laptop, her passport, the emergency cash she had been hiding in a tampon box for the past 6 months, ever since Cole had started monitoring her spending. $473. Everything she had in the world that Cole did not control. She left her diamond ring on the kitchen counter, positioned carefully next to a single sheet of paper. The note read, "Merry Christmas, Cole. Don't bother looking for us." As she walked toward the elevator, one of the twins woke up and immediately spit up all over Lauren's last clean shirt. The warm, sour liquid soaked through the fabric and dripped down her stomach. Lauren looked at herself in the hallway mirror. Messy hair escaping from a ponytail she had not fixed in 2 days. Dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. A spit-up stain spreading across her chest like a badge of motherhood she had not asked to wear. Great, she thought. I look like the before picture in every Lifetime movie ever made. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Lauren stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. Tommy Reeves was working the night shift, as he always was. He was 28 years old, quiet, observant, the kind of man who noticed everything and said almost nothing. In the 3 years Lauren had lived in this building, he was the only staff member who had ever asked how she was doing and actually waited for an answer. He looked up from his desk as she approached, his eyes taking in the suitcases, the car seats, the expression on her face that said everything and nothing at the same time. He did not ask where she was going. He did not ask if she needed help. He did not offer to call her a cab or contact her husband. Instead, he simply stood up, walked to the front door, and held it open for her. As she passed him, he leaned in and whispered, "The night cameras have been glitching all week, Mrs. Mitchell. Technical difficulties. You understand." Lauren understood. She nodded once, not trusting herself to speak, and stepped out into the snow. The cold hit her like a physical force, stealing her breath, making her eyes water. The twins stirred in their car seats but did not wake. Lauren walked quickly, her boots crunching through the fresh powder, her breath fogging in the air. She had called a car service from an app on her phone, one that Cole did not know about, one that let her pay with the prepaid debit card she had bought 6 months ago during a rare solo trip to the pharmacy. The car was waiting at the corner, just as promised. The driver did not ask questions. He helped her load the car seats, accepted her cash payment without comment, and drove her to the bus station in New Jersey. Lauren bought a ticket for the first bus leaving the city. She did not care where it was going. She just needed to be somewhere else. Somewhere Cole could not find her. Somewhere she could think. The bus was nearly empty at that hour. Lauren found a seat near the back, positioned the car seats on either side of her, and watched Manhattan disappear through the window. For the first time in 4 years, she felt something that might have been hope. That feeling lasted exactly 6 hours. By noon on Christmas Day, Lauren had checked into a motel in southern New Jersey using a fake name and the last of her cash. The room smelled like cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner, but it had a working heater and a lock on the door, and that was enough. She fed the twins, changed their diapers, and put them down for a nap in the center of the bed surrounded by pillows. Then she pulled out her phone to check her messages. The screen was full of notifications. 17 missed calls from Cole, 23 text messages, escalating from confusion to anger to something that sounded almost like concern, but was really just control dressed up in worried language. And then, at 11:45 that morning, a news alert from a local station. The headline made her blood run cold. Missing mother and twins. Husband pleads for safe return. There was a photograph of her face, one from their wedding day, smiling and radiant and completely unrecognizable as the woman sitting in this motel room. Below it was a statement from Cole, his voice breaking with manufactured emotion as he begged anyone with information to come forward. "My wife has been struggling with postpartum depression," he said in the video clip. "I am terrified for her safety and the safety of our children. Please, if you have seen her, contact the police immediately." Lauren watched the video 3 times. She watched the way Cole's eyes never quite matched his words. She watched the way his hands stayed perfectly still, no trembling, no nervous energy. She watched the way he looked directly into the camera, performing grief for an audience he knew was watching. And she understood, with a clarity that cut through her exhaustion like a blade, exactly what he was doing. Cole had reported her as a kidnapper. Cole was turning the entire city into a weapon to bring her home. Her credit cards were frozen. She checked twice, watching the decline notices pile up on her screen. Her joint bank account was emptied, transferred to an account she could not access. Even the prepaid debit card showed a zero balance, though she had no idea how Cole had found it. She had $47 in cash, 2 babies who needed formula and diapers, a motel room paid through the morning, and nowhere to go. Lauren sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. Maybe Cole was right, she thought. Maybe I cannot do this alone. Maybe I should just go back and accept that this is my life now. Maybe fighting was always going to be pointless. The twins began to cry, their small voices rising in unison, demanding attention she was not sure she had left to give. And then her phone rang. Unknown number. Unknown area code. Lauren answered with shaking hands. A woman's voice, calm and steady, spoke on the other end. "Lauren, it is Diane. Do not hang up. I know what my son is, and I am going to help you destroy him." Diane Whitmore was 62 years old, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and nothing like the woman Lauren had expected to hear from on Christmas afternoon. In 4 years of marriage to Cole, Lauren had met her mother-in-law exactly 7 times. Diane was always polite, always distant, always watching with eyes that seemed to see more than she ever said out loud. Cole spoke of her rarely, and when he did, it was with a dismissive tone that suggested she was irrelevant to his life. Now, hearing Diane's voice on the phone, Lauren understood that irrelevance had been a disguise. "You need to listen carefully," Diane said. "I do not have much time, and neither do you. Cole has connections at the local police department. Someone there owes him a favor. They are already running your credit cards, checking bus stations, putting your face on every news channel they can reach. By tomorrow morning, you will not be able to walk into a gas station without someone recognizing you." Lauren's throat tightened. "How do you know all of this?" "Because I spent 40 years married to a man just like Cole." Diane's voice was flat, matter-of-fact, stripped of emotion. "His father. I learned how the game works. I learned what men like them do when they feel their control slipping away. And I learned how to survive it, even if I never had the courage to escape." Lauren pressed her free hand against the wall to steady herself. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you got out," Diane said simply. "You actually got out. I never did. And I will be damned if I watch my grandchildren grow up in the same house I could not leave." There was a pause. Lauren could hear Diane breathing on the other end, could almost feel the weight of 40 years of silence finally breaking. "My sister has a cabin in upstate New York," Diane continued. "It is remote, off the grid, registered under her married name. Cole does not know it exists. I can have a car pick you up within the hour. You and the babies will be safe there while we figure out what comes next." Lauren looked at the twins, still crying in the center of the bed. She looked at the motel room with its stained carpet and thin walls. She looked at the $47 in her wallet. "What do you want in return?" she asked. Diane laughed, a short, humorless sound. "I want my son to face consequences for once in his life. I want those babies to grow up knowing their mother was strong enough to fight. And I want to finally do the right thing, even if it is 40 years too late." The car arrived in 53 minutes. The driver was an older man named Walter, who worked for a private service Diane had used for years. He did not ask questions, did not make small talk, did not look at Lauren with the pity or suspicion she had been bracing herself for. He simply loaded her bags into the trunk, helped her secure the car seats, and drove north through the fading afternoon light. The cabin was 3 hours away, tucked into a valley surrounded by bare trees and frozen fields. It was small but clean, with a wood stove for heat and a pantry stocked with enough supplies to last a month. There was no internet, no cable television, no way for the outside world to reach in. Lauren spent the first night sitting by the window, watching snow fall through the darkness, waiting for the sound of tires on the gravel driveway that would mean Cole had found her. The sound never came. By the third day, she began to breathe again. Diane arrived on day 4, carrying boxes of documents she had been collecting for years. Financial records, account statements, receipts and contracts and emails printed from servers Cole did not know she could access. "I started keeping copies after your wedding," Diane explained, spreading papers across the cabin's small kitchen table. "I recognized the signs, the way he controlled conversations, the way he made you apologize for things that were not your fault, the way you started shrinking yourself to fit into the space he allowed you to occupy." Lauren stared at the documents. There were hundreds of pages, maybe thousands. "I was a forensic accountant," she said slowly, "before I quit my job, before Cole convinced me that my career was interfering with our family." Diane's eyes sharpened with interest. "You were?" Lauren nodded. "I was good at it too. I could read financial documents like other people read novels. I could find patterns that nobody else noticed, discrepancies hidden in plain sight." "Then you understand what you are looking at," Diane said, pushing a stack of papers toward her. "These are the records from Whitmore and Associates, Cole's company. His father built it, and Cole has been running it into the ground ever since." Lauren picked up the first page. Within 30 minutes, she had found the first discrepancy, a payment to a vendor that did not exist, a transfer to an account with no corresponding invoice. Within 2 hours, she had found the pattern. Cole had been embezzling from his own family company for at least 3 years. Small amounts at first, easy to overlook, but growing larger and more frequent as his confidence increased. The money was being funneled through a series of shell companies, each one registered in a different state, each one ultimately leading back to the same place, an apartment in Tribeca, the one where Sierra Cole was living. "He has stolen over $2 million," Lauren said, her voice hollow with disbelief. "From his own father's company, from his own family." Diane nodded grimly. "And that is just what I could find. There is more, I am certain. He was always smarter than his father, always better at hiding things." Lauren looked up from the documents, a new feeling rising in her chest. Not hope exactly, something harder than hope, something with edges. "I know how to find the rest," she said. "I know exactly how to follow this trail." For the first time in years, Lauren Mitchell felt powerful. She spent the next 2 weeks turning the cabin into a war room. Documents covered every surface. Timelines were taped to walls. Color-coded sticky notes tracked the flow of money through Cole's maze of shell companies and fake vendors. Lauren worked with the focus she had not felt since before her marriage, her forensic accounting skills returning like muscle memory, her brain lighting up with the satisfaction of solving a puzzle that had consequences. She called Meg Patterson on day 6. Meg had been Lauren's college roommate, her closest friend, the maid of honor at her wedding. They had not spoken in 3 years, not since Cole had declared that Meg was a bad influence, and Lauren had been too tired to fight about it. Meg answered on the second ring. "Lauren," she said, her voice a mixture of shock and relief. "Oh my God, I saw the news. I have been trying to figure out how to reach you. Are you okay? Are the babies okay?" Lauren told her everything. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "So let me get this straight, and Meg said finally. Your husband is cheating, embezzling, and gaslighting, and you have evidence of all three? Yes, another pause. Then Meg laughed, a sound Lauren had not realized she missed until she heard it. Girl, Meg said, this is the best divorce case I have ever had. I might actually enjoy my job for once. The cabin felt safe for exactly 18 days. On the 19th day, Cole found them. Lauren was in the kitchen reviewing a particularly damning set of financial transfers when she heard the sound of tires on gravel. Her entire body went cold. She moved to the window and looked out at the driveway. A sheriff's cruiser was pulling up behind a black Mercedes she recognized immediately. Cole stepped out of the Mercedes, his face arranged in an expression of concerned fatherhood that Lauren could see through even from 50 feet away. Behind him, a deputy in uniform climbed out of the cruiser, a folded document in his hand. Lauren's hand started shaking. She backed away from the window, her mind racing through options that did not exist. The front door was the only exit. The windows were too small to climb through with two babies. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, nothing to do but face what was coming. Diane appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face pale. Lauren, she whispered, I am so sorry. I do not know how they found us. The knock on the door was not loud, but it echoed through the small cabin like a gunshot. Lauren opened it. Cole stood on the porch, snowflakes catching in his dark hair, his smile sharp and satisfied. Behind him, the deputy held the document like a weapon. Lauren, sweetheart, Cole said, his voice dripping with manufactured concern. Thank God you are safe. I have been so worried about you. Lauren did not move, did not speak, did not give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Cole's smile flickered just for a moment before he recovered. The babies, he continued. Where are they? I need to see that they are okay. They are fine, Lauren said flatly. They have been fine the entire time. Cole shook his head slowly, sadly, like a man burdened by his wife's unreasonable behavior. You see, he said to the deputy, this is what I was telling you. She has been unstable since the pregnancy. I tried to get her help, but she refused. The deputy stepped forward. Mrs. Whitmore, he said formally, using the name that was no longer hers. I have an emergency custody order signed by Judge Harrison. Based on testimony from medical professionals and your husband, the court has determined that the children may be in immediate danger. Lauren's blood turned to ice. What medical professionals? She demanded. The deputy did not answer. He simply handed her the document. Lauren read it with shaking hands. The language was clinical, devastating. Words like postpartum psychosis and flight risk and imminent harm leaped off the page. This is a lie, she said, her voice cracking despite her efforts to stay calm. I have not been diagnosed with anything. I have never hurt my children. I left because my husband is a cheater and a criminal. Cole sighed heavily. You see what I mean, he said to the deputy. She has become paranoid, delusional. She has been making accusations like this for weeks. I have evidence, Lauren shouted. I have documents proving he has embezzled millions of dollars from his own company. Cole's expression shifted just slightly, but he recovered almost instantly. Sweetheart, he said gently, there is no evidence. There is just your illness making you see things that are not there. The deputy looked uncomfortable, but he had a job to do. Ma'am, he said, I need to take the children into protective custody. You can contest this at the hearing, but for now, the order stands. Lauren felt the world tilting, sliding, collapsing around her. They are my babies, she whispered. I am their mother. I have not done anything wrong. Cole stepped forward, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. You should have stayed home, Lauren. The deputy walked past her into the cabin. She could hear him in the nursery, could hear the twins starting to cry as unfamiliar hands lifted them from their beds. Lauren tried to follow. Cole blocked her path. Do not make this harder than it has to be, he said quietly. Come home. Apologize. Stop this foolishness. We can still fix this. Lauren looked at the man she had married, the man she had loved, the man she had built a life around, the man who was now taking her children away because she had dared to leave. I would rather die, she said. Cole smiled. That can be arranged, he replied. The deputy emerged from the cabin carrying both car seats. The twins were screaming now, their tiny faces red with confusion and fear. Lauren lunged toward them and the deputy stepped back, shielding the babies with his body. "Ma'am, please, do not make me restrain you." Lauren stopped. Her arms fell to her sides. Her vision blurred with tears she could not hold back. She watched as the deputy loaded her children into the back of Cole's Mercedes. She watched as Cole climbed into the driver's seat, his expression triumphant. She watched as the car pulled away, disappearing down the gravel driveway, taking everything that mattered with it. Then she sank to her knees in the snow and screamed. The cabin was silent after they left. Lauren sat on the floor where she had collapsed, unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything but exist in the aftermath of what had just happened. Diane tried to comfort her. She brought blankets, made tea, said words that were probably meant to be soothing. Lauren heard none of it. She was somewhere else entirely, somewhere deep inside herself, where the pain could not quite reach. By evening, the numbness had settled into something harder. Not acceptance, never acceptance, but a grim understanding of the situation she now faced. She called Meg. "The hearing," Lauren said, her voice rough from crying. "When is it?" 28 days, Meg replied. "I checked the docket as soon as I heard. Emergency custody orders are temporary. We have less than a month to build a case strong enough to reverse it. I do not have 28 days. Lauren's voice cracked. "My babies are with him right now. God knows what he is telling them, what he is doing to them." "Lauren, listen to me." Meg's voice was firm, professional, the voice of a lawyer who had seen situations like this before. "I know this feels impossible. I know every instinct you have is screaming at you to do something, anything, right now. But the system does not work that way. The first hearing almost always favors the parent with resources. That is not justice, that is just reality." "So what am I supposed to do?" Lauren whispered. "Just wait?" "No," Meg said. "You are supposed to fight, but you have to fight smart. Temporary custody is not permanent custody. We have evidence, we have documentation. We have a paper trail that proves Cole is a liar and a criminal. We just need time to put it together in a way the court cannot ignore." Lauren closed her eyes. "What if it is not enough?" "Then we find more," Meg said simply. "You have something better than his money and his lawyers and his connections. You have the truth, and you have a forensic accountant's brain. Now use it." The next 4 weeks were the hardest of Lauren's life. She worked 18-hour days, barely sleeping, barely eating, fueled by coffee and rage and the desperate need to hold her children again. Every financial document became a weapon. Every bank statement became ammunition. Every discrepancy she found was another brick in the wall she was building around Cole. Diane worked alongside her, making calls to old contacts, pulling strings that Lauren did not know existed. Meg filed motion after motion, demanding access to records Cole was trying to hide, subpoenaing witnesses who had seen things they had been paid to forget. Slowly, painfully, the case began to take shape. Cole had not just embezzled from his company. He had created an entire network of fake charities and shell corporations to launder the money. He had bribed accountants and intimidated employees. He had used company funds to pay for Sierra Cole's apartment, her jewelry, her lifestyle. And Sierra herself was not just a mistress. Lauren discovered this on the 21st day while tracing a series of payments that did not match any pattern she recognized. Sierra Cole was connected to a man named Marcus Webb. Marcus Webb was Cole's biggest competitor in the financial services industry. Sierra had been receiving regular payments from a company that Marcus Webb controlled. Lauren stared at the evidence, her exhausted brain slowly putting the pieces together. Sierra was not just sleeping with Cole. She was spying on him. She was feeding information to his rival. She was positioned to destroy him from the inside, which meant that Sierra had just as much to lose as Cole did if the truth came out. Lauren picked up the phone and called Meg. "I have found something," she said. "Something big." The court date arrived on a Thursday morning in late January. Lauren walked into the courtroom wearing the only professional outfit she had managed to salvage from her old life. Her hair was pulled back. Her hands were steady. Her folder of evidence was thick enough to break a man's career. Cole sat on the other side of the courtroom with his lawyer, a sleek man in an expensive suit who looked like he had never lost a case. Cole himself was the picture of wounded fatherhood, his expression carefully calibrated to project concern and confusion and just the right amount of sadness. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Catherine Brennan. She had a reputation for being fair but tough, the kind of judge who did not tolerate grandstanding or manipulation. Lauren had researched her extensively. She was their best chance. Meg presented the evidence systematically. Bank records showing unauthorized transfers. Shell companies with no legitimate business purpose. A paper trail leading directly from Whitmore and Associates to Sierra Cole's apartment in Tribeca. The judge listened with growing interest, her eyes sharpening as the scope of Cole's crimes became clear. "Mr. Whitmore," Judge Brennan said finally, turning her attention to the other side of the courtroom. "These are serious allegations. I am ordering a forensic audit of all accounts listed in this motion." Cole's lawyer tried to object. "Your Honor, this is clearly a fishing expedition by a woman who has demonstrated erratic and unstable behavior." Judge Brennan silenced him with a look. "The audit will proceed," she said firmly. "We will reconvene in 2 weeks to review the findings." Lauren walked out of the courtroom feeling something she had not allowed herself to feel in weeks. Hope. The hope lasted exactly 6 days. Lauren was at the cabin when Meg called with the news. "There was a break-in," Meg said, her voice flat with disbelief, "at the accounting firm. Last night, someone destroyed all the physical records related to Cole's accounts, and the digital backups were corrupted." Lauren's stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" "I am saying the evidence is gone," Meg replied. "All of it. The bank records, the transfer documentation, the shell company paperwork. Everything we submitted to the court was based on those files, and now they do not exist." "How is that possible?" Lauren demanded. "We made copies, multiple copies. The copies were stored at the firm," Meg said grimly. "Standard procedure. We did not anticipate someone would be desperate enough to destroy an entire accounting office." Lauren sank into a chair. "Cole," she whispered. "He did this. We cannot prove that," Meg said carefully. "And without proof, we have nothing. But Diane has copies. The documents she gave me at the beginning. Those are still here." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Meg," Lauren said slowly, "what are you not telling me?" "There is something else," Meg replied. "Something happened this morning. I tried to reach Diane to coordinate our next steps, but her phone is disconnected. And then I saw the news." "What news?" "Check your email. I am sending you the link now." Lauren opened her laptop and clicked on the message from Meg. It was a video, a press conference. Diane Whitmore standing at a podium, cameras flashing, microphones pointed at her face. Lauren pressed play. Diane's voice filled the cabin, calm and measured, and completely unrecognizable. "I deeply regret any confusion caused by my previous involvement in my daughter-in-law's case. Lauren Mitchell has been suffering from severe postpartum psychosis, and I was manipulated by her delusions. I fully support my son Cole in his efforts to protect his children. I will not be providing any further documents or testimony." The video ended. Lauren stared at the screen. "She turned on me," she whispered. "Diane turned on me." Meg's voice was gentle. "I do not understand it either. But without her testimony and without the accounting records, our case is severely compromised." "What does that mean for the hearing?" "It means Cole's lawyers are going to file a motion to dismiss tomorrow. And without new evidence, I do not know if we can stop them." Lauren closed her laptop. She looked around the cabin, at the documents still scattered across every surface, at the timeline on the wall that now led nowhere, at the phone that had gone silent, the allies who had disappeared, the hope that had evaporated. She had done everything right. She had gathered evidence. She had found allies. Also FBI's. She had fought back with every weapon available to her, and she had still lost. Maybe the system was not designed for people like her to win. Maybe men like Cole always came out on top. Maybe fighting had been pointless from the beginning. Lauren put her head down on the table and let the darkness wash over her. Lauren did not know how long she sat there in the darkness. Hours, maybe. The light outside the windows shifted from gray to black, and still she did not move. Her body felt like it belonged to someone else, a hollow shell that had forgotten how to function. The twins were gone. The evidence was destroyed. Her only ally had betrayed her. There was nothing left to fight for. She had stopped crying sometime around midnight, not because the pain had lessened, but because her body had simply run out of tears. Now she sat in a silence so complete it felt like drowning. The cabin creaked around her, settling into the cold. Outside, wind howled through the bare trees, a sound that seemed to match the emptiness inside her chest. Lauren thought about the twins, about Emma's stubborn little chin and Noah's watchful eyes, about the way they smelled after a bath, like baby shampoo and innocence, about the weight of them in her arms, solid and warm and real. She would never hold them again. The thought hit her like a physical blow, stealing what little breath she had left. This is what defeat feels like, she realized. Not dramatic, not loud, just quiet, creeping certainty that nothing will ever be okay again. Her phone sat on the table in front of her, screen dark, battery dying. She had not charged it in 2 days. What was the point? Everyone who might call had either abandoned her or been silenced. But then, at 3:47 in the morning, the screen lit up. An email notification. Lauren stared at it without moving. Probably spam. Probably some algorithm trying to sell her something she did not need. Probably nothing at all. But something made her reach for the phone anyway. Some stubborn flicker of hope that refused to die, no matter how hard she tried to smother it. The email was from an address she did not recognize, a string of random letters and numbers at a generic domain. The subject line made her breath stop. I know what Cole did and I can prove it. Lauren's heart began to pound. Her hands, which had been steady in their numbness, started to shake. She opened the message. Lauren, it began, I know you have every reason to delete this without reading it. I know what I did. I know what I helped Cole do. I am not asking for forgiveness because I do not deserve it, and we both know that. I am not writing to you because I am sorry. I am writing because Cole just discovered that I have been working for Marcus Webb this entire time, and now he is planning to frame me for everything. Every crime, every stolen dollar, every lie. He is going to make me the villain of this story while he walks away clean, and I refuse to let that happen. Here is what you need to know. I have recordings, audio files of Cole admitting to the fraud, the embezzlement, the affairs, all of it. Hours of conversation where he bragged about what he was doing. He thought he could trust me. He talked to me like I was on his side, like I was impressed by his cleverness. He never imagined I was keeping copies of everything. I was supposed to use these recordings for Marcus Webb. That was the deal. I would gather evidence, and he would pay me enough to start over somewhere else. But Cole found out about Marcus before I could deliver. Now Cole is threatening to destroy me, and Marcus has gone silent. I have nothing left to lose. So I am sending you these recordings because if I am going down, Cole is coming with me. The files will be attached to a follow-up email in exactly 1 hour. Do with them what you will. One more thing, Lauren. I know you hate me. You should, but I want you to know something that might matter to you someday. Cole never loved either of us. We were both just tools to him. The difference is you figured it out and tried to escape. I figured it out and tried to profit. You were the better woman, for whatever that is worth now. Sarah Lauren read the message 5 times. Her brain, which had felt frozen for days, suddenly sparked back to life. Calculations began running through her mind. Possibilities, strategies, risks. She picked up her phone and called Meg. It was almost 4 in the morning, but Meg answered on the second ring. Her voice was groggy but alert, the voice of someone who had been waiting for exactly this kind of call. Lauren, what happened? Are you okay? I just received something, Lauren said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Stronger, sharper, like a blade being pulled from a sheath. I received something from Sierra. There was a pause. Meg's voice shifted, becoming cautious. Sierra Cole? The mistress? The corporate spy, Lauren corrected. She's been working for Marcus Webb this entire time. Cole found out. He is planning to frame her for everything. And now she is offering me recordings that could destroy him. Another pause, longer this time. Lauren could almost hear Meg's lawyer brain processing the implications. Lauren, Meg said carefully, I need you to think about this very carefully. Evidence from Sierra is complicated. She is a criminal too. She helped Cole hurt you. Her credibility is questionable at best. Any defense attorney worth his fee is going to tear her apart on the stand. I know, Lauren said. And using her recordings means accepting help from someone who helped ruin your life. Someone who slept with your husband while you were pregnant. Someone who watched your marriage fall apart and did nothing. I know, Lauren repeated. Can you live with that? Meg's voice softened. Because this is not just about winning the case, Lauren. This is about who you are going to be on the other side of it. Can you look at yourself in the mirror, knowing you won because of her? Lauren closed her eyes. She thought about the twins again, about Emma learning to walk, taking those first wobbly steps across the living room while Lauren held her breath. About Noah's first laugh, a sound so pure it had made Lauren cry. She thought about the system that had taken them from her. The emergency custody order signed by a judge who had never met her, the deputy who had carried them away while she screamed, the way Cole had smiled as he drove off with her children in the back of his car. She thought about all the times she had played by the rules, all the times she had been polite, patient, understanding, all the times she had trusted that if she just did the right thing would happen to her. And she thought about where that trust had gotten her, sitting alone in a cabin at 4 in the morning, with nothing but a dying phone and a decision that would define the rest of her life. Meg, she said quietly, in court, does the source of evidence matter more than the evidence itself? Meg hesitated. Legally speaking, it depends on how the evidence was obtained. If the recordings were made illegally, if Sierra violated wiretapping laws, they could be thrown out. But if she was a participant in the conversations, if Cole knew he was being recorded, or if the state allows single-party consent, they could be admissible. New York is a single-party consent state, Lauren said. I looked it up months ago. When I first started suspecting Cole was hiding things, there was a long exhale on the other end. You already know what you are going to do you not? Lauren opened her eyes. Yes. Then why did you call me? Because I needed someone to tell me it was okay to stop being the good victim, Lauren said. I needed someone to give me permission to fight dirty. Silence stretched between them. Then Meg spoke, and her voice was different now. Harder, more determined. Lauren Mitchell, listen to me very carefully. You do not need anyone's permission to save your children. You do not need to be noble or pure or morally superior. You need to win. And sometimes winning means using the weapons that land in your lap, even if they come from enemies. Here is what I know after 15 years of family law. The system is not fair. It was not designed to be fair. It was designed to maintain order, and order usually favors people with money and power. Cole has both. You have neither. But you have something he does not have. You have the truth, and now you have recordings that prove it. So stop asking if you can live with using Sierra's evidence. Ask yourself this instead. Can you live with not using it? Can you look your children in the eye in 20 years and tell them you had a chance to bring them home, and you did not take it because you were worried about looking like the good guy? Lauren felt something shift inside her, something that had been locked away for years, buried under layers of compromise and accommodation, and pretending to be smaller than she was. No, she said, I cannot live with that. Then send me whatever she gives you, Meg replied. We will figure out how to use it. And Lauren? Yes? Welcome back. I have been waiting for this version of you to show up. The recordings arrived exactly 1 hour later, as promised. 17 audio files, over 8 hours of conversation. Cole's voice, casual and arrogant and completely unguarded, spilling secrets he thought would never see the light of day. Lauren listened to them with headphones, alone in the cabin, her hands gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. The first recording was Cole talking about the shell companies. He explained them to Sierra like he was teaching a child, his tone condescending and proud. He described how he had set them up, how he had hidden the money, how he had fooled the accountants who were supposed to be watching. The second recording was worse. Cole bragging about how he had manipulated Lauren, how he had convinced her to quit her job, how he had isolated her from her friends, how he had made her believe she was crazy when she questioned him. She actually apologized to me, Cole said on the recording, laughing. She caught me coming home at 2 in the morning smelling like your perfume, and she apologized for being suspicious. Can you believe that? I married the perfect mark. Lauren stopped the recording. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely press the button. She sat in silence for a full minute, breathing through the rage that threatened to consume her. Then she pressed play on the third recording, and that was when she heard it. The best part, Cole said, his voice slurred with alcohol. My mother thinks she has leverage over me. She thinks those documents she copied are going to matter. She thinks she is so clever, hiding them away like they are some kind of insurance policy. But I have leverage over her too. I know what she helped my father cover up 30 years ago. A client embezzlement scandal that would have destroyed the company. My father paid people off, buried the evidence, and my mother helped him do it. She typed the letters. She shredded the documents. She was an accessory to everything. One word from me, and she spends the rest of her life in prison. Lauren stopped the recording. She played it again, and suddenly everything made sense. Diane had not betrayed her. Diane had been protecting her. Cole was blackmailing his own mother, using a secret from decades ago to force her into silence. When Diane had issued that public statement, when she had withdrawn her support, she had not done it because she had turned against Lauren. She had done it because her son had threatened to destroy her. Diane had sacrificed herself to buy Lauren time. Lauren picked up her phone and called a number she had memorized weeks ago, a number she had never expected to use again. Diane answered on the third ring. Her voice was hollow and tired, the voice of a woman who had been carrying too much weight for too long. "Lauren," she said, "I am so sorry. I had no choice. He threatened to." "I know," Lauren interrupted gently. "I know what he is holding over you. I heard him talking about it." Silence, then barely a whisper. "You know, I know everything," Lauren said, "and I need you to trust me one more time." There was a long pause. Lauren could hear Diane breathing on the other end, could almost feel the weight of 30 years of secrets pressing down on both of them. Then, quietly, Diane asked a question that contained everything: her fear, her hope, her desperate need to finally do the right thing. "What do you need me to do?" Lauren told her, and for the first time since the twins had been taken, she felt something that might have been hope. The final custody hearing took place on a Tuesday morning in early February. Lauren had not slept the night before. She had spent hours reviewing the evidence, rehearsing her testimony, preparing for every possible attack Cole's lawyers might launch. By dawn, she knew the case inside and out, every document memorized, every timeline committed to memory. But preparation could only take her so far. The rest would come down to performance. The courtroom was packed when she arrived. Word had spread about the case, about the accusations and counter-accusations, about the wealthy family tearing itself apart in public. Reporters filled the back row, notebooks open, phones recording. Curious observers packed the gallery, drawn by the promise of drama. Lauren walked through the double doors and felt every eye in the room turn toward her. She was wearing black, not as a fashion choice, but as a statement. She was done pretending to be soft, done shrinking herself to make others comfortable, done playing the role of the fragile victim who needed saving. Today, she was going to fight. Meg walked beside her, carrying a folder that was thicker than it had been at the last hearing. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with a confidence that matched her expression. Cole sat at the defendant's table with his expensive lawyer, a man named Harrison Burke, who charged $800 an hour and had never lost a custody case. Cole was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Lauren's car. His hair was perfectly styled, his posture relaxed, his expression carefully calibrated to project wounded fatherhood. He looked confident, smug even. He had won every round so far. He fully expected to win this one too. When Lauren took her seat at the plaintiff's table, Cole glanced over at her. Their eyes met for the first time since the cabin. He smirked. Lauren did not react. She simply turned away and opened her folder, as if he were not worth acknowledging. The smirk faltered just for a moment. Good, Lauren thought. Let him wonder what changed. Judge Catherine Brennan entered the courtroom at exactly 9 o'clock. She was 63 years old, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for being fair but merciless when lawyers tried to waste her time. "All rise," the bailiff called. Everyone stood. The room fell silent. Judge Brennan took her seat and surveyed the courtroom with an expression that suggested she had already seen more drama today than she had patience for. "We are here to review the custody arrangement for the minor children, Emma and Noah Whitmore," she began. "I understand there have been significant developments since our last session." She looked at Meg. "Counselor, you may proceed." Meg stood, smoothing her jacket with a gesture that looked casual but was actually calculated to draw attention. "Your Honor, we have new evidence that materially changes the circumstances of this case." Cole's lawyer was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, I must object. The defense has had no opportunity to review any new evidence. This is a clear violation of discovery rules and should not be permitted. Judge Brennan raised an eyebrow. Counselor Patterson? Meg smiled. It was not a friendly smile. That is because the evidence was provided to us only recently, by a witness who was previously cooperating with Mr. Whitmore, but who has now come forward with information critical to these proceedings. The gallery murmured. Reporters leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. Judge Brennan's expression sharpened with interest. Proceed. Meg walked to the center of the courtroom, commanding attention with every step. Your Honor, she began, over the past several weeks, Mrs. Mitchell has gathered extensive evidence demonstrating that Cole Whitmore has engaged in systematic financial crimes, including embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. We have documentation showing that Mr. Whitmore has stolen over $2 million from his own family company through a network of shell corporations and fake vendors. Harrison Burke stood again. Your Honor, these allegations were already addressed in the previous hearing. The evidence was deemed insufficient. The previous evidence was destroyed, Meg replied calmly, in a break-in that we believe Mr. Whitmore orchestrated. However, we have obtained new evidence. Evidence that cannot be destroyed or corrupted or made to disappear. She pulled a small digital recorder from her jacket pocket and held it up for the court to see. We would like to play audio recordings of Mr. Cole Whitmore discussing his financial crimes in detail. These recordings were made by Sarah Cole, who was Mr. Whitmore's romantic partner and who has agreed to testify in these proceedings. Cole's face went pale. For the first time since Lauren had known him, he looked genuinely afraid. Objection, Harrison Burke said, his voice losing some of its polished confidence. These recordings were obtained without my client's consent. They violate his right to privacy and should be deemed inadmissible. Judge Brennan looked at Meg. Counselor? New York is a single-party consent state, Your Honor, Meg replied. Ms. Cole was a participant in these conversations. She had every legal right to record them. The recordings are authentic, unaltered, and directly relevant to this custody matter. Judge Brennan considered this for a moment. Then she nodded. I will allow the recordings to be played. Objection overruled. Harrison Burke sat down heavily, his expression tight. Meg connected the recorder to the courtroom's audio system. The speakers crackled once, then fell silent. Then Cole's voice filled the room. The recordings played for 47 minutes. Every word, every laugh, every casual admission of guilt echoed off the walls of the courtroom. Cole talking about the shell companies he had created. Cole bragging about fooling the accountants. Cole mocking Lauren's naivety, laughing about how easy she had been to manipulate. She actually apologized to me, the recorded voice said, thick with amusement. She caught me at 2 in the morning and apologized for being suspicious. I married the perfect mark. Lauren watched the gallery's reaction. She watched the reporter's expression shift from curiosity to shock to barely concealed disgust. She watched the observers in the back row exchange glances, their opinions of Cole Whitmore changing in real time. And she watched Cole himself. His face had gone from pale to gray. His hands, which had been folded confidently on the table, were now gripping the edge so hard his knuckles were white. His lawyer was whispering urgently in his ear, but Cole did not seem to hear. He was staring at the recorder like it was a bomb that had already detonated. When the recordings finally ended, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Judge Brennan's expression had grown darker with each passing minute. Now she looked at Cole with an intensity that made even Lauren uncomfortable. Meg spoke into the silence. We also have documentary evidence corroborating these admissions. Bank statements that Mrs. Mitchell reconstructed from her own observations during the marriage. Testimony from building staff about Mr. Whitmore's abusive behavior. Records of financial transactions that match the crimes described in the recordings. She paused, letting the weight of the evidence settle over the courtroom. And we have one final witness. Meg turned toward the gallery, her voice ringing with authority. We call Diane Whitmore. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Observers gasped and whispered. Harrison Burke shot to his feet so fast he knocked his chair backward. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Cole's voice cracked with desperation. My mother issued a public statement supporting me. She said Lauren was mentally unstable She said I was a good father. Judge Brennan silenced him with a single raised hand. Mr. Whitmore, you will not speak out of turn in my courtroom. She turned to the gallery. Mrs. Whitmore, please approach the stand. The crowd parted. Diane Whitmore walked forward slowly, her face composed but pale. She was wearing a simple navy dress, no jewelry, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked older than Lauren remembered, more fragile, but her eyes, when they met Lauren's across the courtroom, held something that might have been gratitude. Diane took her seat in the witness box and raised her right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do, Diane replied. Her voice was steady, but Lauren could see her hands trembling in her lap. Meg approached her with gentle authority. Mrs. Whitmore, on January 14th of this year, you issued a public statement claiming that Lauren Mitchell was mentally unstable and that you supported your son's efforts to gain custody of the children. Was that statement true? Diane lifted her chin. The trembling in her hands stopped. No, she said clearly, it was a lie. I was being blackmailed by my son. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Cameras flashed. Reporters typed furiously on their phones. Judge Brennan leaned forward. Can you explain, Mrs. Whitmore? Diane took a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the room. My son discovered that I had been helping Lauren gather evidence against him. He was furious. He came to my home and threatened me. He said that if I did not withdraw my support and issue a public statement backing him, he would expose something from my past. She paused, swallowing hard. 30 years ago, my late husband committed fraud. He embezzled money from a client and covered it up. I helped him. I typed the letters. I shredded the documents. I was young and scared and I loved him, and I did what he asked me to do. My son knew about this. He had found the records years ago, kept them as leverage. He told me that if I did not abandon Lauren, he would turn those records over to the authorities. He said I would spend the rest of my life in prison. She looked at Cole and her eyes were filled with something that might have been pity. So I made the statement. I lied. I abandoned the only person who had ever tried to break free from the cycle of abuse and control that has defined this family for generations. Diane reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. She handed it to Meg, but I did not stop gathering evidence. I recorded our conversations. I saved his threatening messages. I documented everything. Meg submitted the folder to the court. Your Honor, this folder contains text messages from Cole Whitmore explicitly threatening his mother with exposure if she did not comply with his demands. It also contains audio recordings of their conversations in which he admits to the blackmail. Harrison Burke tried to intervene, but his voice had lost its authority. Your Honor, this testimony is clearly coached and unreliable. Mrs. Whitmore is obviously being manipulated by the plaintiff's counsel. Judge Brennan held up a hand, silencing him. I will determine what is reliable, Mr. Burke. She looked at Diane. Continue, Mrs. Whitmore. Diane turned to look at her son. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Cole's face was twisted with rage, his careful mask finally shattered. Diane's expression was sad, but resolute. Cole, she said softly, I failed you as a mother. I let your father teach you that control was the same as love. I watched you become him, and I said nothing because saying something would have meant admitting what I had helped him do. Her voice broke slightly, but she pressed on. I watched you destroy your marriage. I watched you manipulate your wife. I watched you use your own children as weapons. And I stayed silent because I was afraid. But I am not afraid anymore. She straightened in her seat, her voice growing stronger. I am not going to fail those babies the way I failed you. They deserve better than the legacy of this family. They deserve a mother who loves them without conditions. They deserve Lauren. The courtroom was silent. Then Cole snapped. He surged to his feet, his chair crashing backward, his voice rising to a scream. This is a conspiracy. My wife poisoned my mother against me. This entire case is fabricated. She is insane. They are all insane. Every single person in this room is trying to destroy me. Mr. Whitmore, sit down immediately, Judge Brennan commanded. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. If you do not control yourself, I will have you removed. Cole did not sit. Instead, he turned toward Lauren with murder in his eyes. You think you have won? His voice was low and dangerous. a growl that seemed to come from somewhere deep and dark. You think you can take everything from me and walk away? And then he lunged. He moved so fast that for a moment no one reacted. He vaulted over the defendant's table, his expensive suit jacket tearing at the seam, his perfectly styled hair falling across his face. He was heading straight for Lauren. Security moved fast. Two bailiffs grabbed Cole before he could reach her, wrestling him back, forcing his arms behind his back as he struggled and screamed. "Get off me!" Cole yelled, thrashing against their grip. "She ruined my life. She took everything from me. I gave her everything and she stabbed me in the back." Lauren did not move. She sat perfectly still, watching her husband's mask finally shatter completely, watching him become the monster he had always been underneath the expensive suits and charming smiles. It was almost satisfying. Almost. Judge Brennan's voice cut through the chaos like a gavel made of ice. Mr. Whitmore is remanded to custody pending psychological evaluation and criminal investigation. She looked at Lauren, and something in her expression softened. Full custody of the minor children is awarded to Lauren Mitchell, effective immediately. All visitation rights for the father are suspended until further notice. She brought her gavel down with a crack that echoed through the courtroom. This hearing is adjourned. The bailiffs dragged Cole toward the side door. He was still screaming, still struggling, still threatening everyone within earshot. Lauren sat motionless, barely able to process what had just happened. And then Meg was beside her, gripping her arm, her voice thick with emotion. "You did it," Meg whispered. "Lauren, you won." Lauren closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she let herself breathe. The days that followed the hearing were a blur of paperwork and phone calls, and sleepless nights filled with emotions Lauren could not quite name. Relief, certainly. Exhaustion, definitely. But also something stranger, something she had not expected. Grief, she had won. Cole was in custody. The children were coming home. Everything she had fought for was finally within reach. But winning did not feel the way she had imagined it would. It felt hollow. Lauren spent the first 3 days after the hearing in a kind of daze, moving through the motions of a life she was only beginning to rebuild. She signed documents. She answered questions from investigators. She gave statements to reporters who seemed more interested in her trauma than her triumph. And she waited. The twins could not come home immediately. There were procedures to follow, assessments to complete, bureaucratic boxes to check. The system that had taken them from her was now the system she had to navigate to get them back. It was maddening. It was also, Lauren realized, completely predictable. Here is something I learned during those waiting days, she thought. The system does not care about your happy ending. It does not care about your relief or your impatience or your desperate need to hold your children again. It moves at its own pace and you can rage against it all you want, but raging does not make it faster. So you learn to wait. You learn to fill the hours with productive things instead of destructive spirals. You learn that patience is not passive. It is a choice you make over and over every time you want to scream. Lauren got her children back on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the hearing. The social worker was a woman named Patricia who had kind eyes and a gentle manner. She brought the twins to the address Lauren had provided, a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood in New Jersey that Meg had helped her find. The apartment was nothing special. 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, a living room that barely fit a couch and a television. The walls needed painting, and the heating system made strange noises, and the view from the window was a parking lot. But it was hers. Paid for with money from a small settlement the court had ordered from Cole's frozen assets. Furnished with second-hand furniture she had picked out herself. Filled with baby supplies she had purchased one item at a time. Preparing for a homecoming she had not allowed herself to believe in until it actually happened. Patricia carried Noah. Lauren carried Emma. The twins did not remember her. That was the part no one had warned her about. The part that broke her heart even as it was being healed. They had been too young when they were taken. 8 months old, too small to hold on to memories that lasted longer than a few days. The 12 weeks they had spent with the Cole and his hired nannies had erased whatever connection they had formed with Lauren during those first exhausting months of motherhood. When Patricia handed Noah to Lauren, he looked at her with curious but unfamiliar eyes. When Lauren reached for Emma, the little girl pulled back, uncertain, reaching instead for the social worker she had grown comfortable with. It is normal, Patricia said gently, seeing the devastation on Lauren's face. Children this age do not remember faces the way older children do. They remember feelings, routines, the way someone holds them, the sound of someone's voice. You will rebuild those connections. It just takes time. Lauren nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She held her children anyway. She held them even though they cried. She held them even though they squirmed and reached for the door, for Patricia, for anything familiar. She held them because she had spent 3 months dreaming of this moment, and she was not going to let their temporary confusion steal the joy she had earned. "You are safe now," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Your mama is never letting you go again." The first week was the hardest. The twins cried constantly. They did not sleep through the night. They rejected the food Lauren prepared, the toys she bought, the routines she tried to establish. They wanted their nannies. They wanted the faces they had grown accustomed to. They wanted anything except this strange woman who kept holding them and crying. Lauren understood. She hated it, but she understood. So she did what forensic accountants do best. She analyzed the problem. She gathered data. She looked for patterns. She learned that almost came down when Lauren sang a specific lullaby, one she had sung during pregnancy. She learned that Noah liked to be held facing outward, where he could see the world. She learned that both twins responded to routine, to predictability, to the quiet confidence of a mother who was not going to give up. By the second week, the crying had lessened. By the third week, Emma reached for Lauren when she woke up in the morning. By the fourth week, Noah laughed for the first time. A real laugh, not just a reflex. A laugh that meant he recognized her, trusted her, loved her. Lauren cried for an hour after that laugh. Good tears, though, the kind that wash away pain instead of adding to it. The criminal case against Cole moved forward while Lauren was rebuilding her relationship with the twins. The recordings Sierra had provided were devastating. Combined with Diane's testimony and Lauren's reconstructed financial evidence, they painted a picture of systematic fraud that even Cole's expensive lawyers could not explain away. Cole was charged with embezzlement, fraud, money laundering, witness intimidation, and assault. His bail was set at $2 million, and for the first time in his life, he could not pay it. His accounts had been frozen pending investigation. The company his father had built was hemorrhaging clients, its reputation destroyed by the scandal. The board of directors, desperate to distance themselves from Cole, had voted to sell the firm to a competitor for pennies on the dollar. Everything Cole had accumulated through lies and manipulation was being stripped away, piece by piece, and he was powerless to stop it. Lauren did not feel triumphant about his downfall. She did not feel vindicated or satisfied or glad. She felt tired. She felt sad for the man Cole could have been if someone had taught him that love was not the same as control. She felt grateful that her children would never know their father as anything other than a cautionary tale, and she felt ready to move on. Sierra Cole testified against Cole in exchange for a reduced sentence. Lauren had mixed feelings about that. Sierra had helped Cole hurt her. Sierra had known about the affairs, the manipulation, the financial crimes. Sierra had watched from the sidelines while Lauren's life fell apart. But Sierra had also saved her. Without those recordings, Lauren would have lost everything. The evidence would have remained destroyed. Diane would have remained silent, and Cole would have walked away with the children and his reputation intact. Sierra had given Lauren the weapon she needed to fight back. Did that erase what Sierra had done? No. Did it make them friends? Absolutely not. But it did complicate the simple narrative of heroes and villains that Lauren had been telling herself. People are not simple, Lauren realized during those long nights after the twins finally fell asleep. We want them to be. We want clear categories. Good people and bad people. Victims and villains. Us and them. But the truth is messier than that. Sierra was not a good person. But she was not purely evil either. She was complicated, flawed, capable of terrible things, and also capable, in her own broken way, of something like redemption. Cole was not a monster. He was a man who had learned the wrong lessons about love and power, who had never been taught that other people had value beyond their usefulness. And Lauren herself was not a perfect victim. She had stayed too long. She had ignored warning signs. She had made excuses for behavior she should have confronted. None of that meant she deserved what happened to her. It just meant she was human. And being human meant learning from mistakes, growing stronger, and refusing to let the past define the future. Sierra was convicted as an accomplice. She served 18 months in a minimum security facility, then disappeared into witness protection. The last anyone heard, she had moved to Arizona and was working at an animal shelter, trying maybe to become the kind of person who helped instead of hurt. Lauren hoped she succeeded, not for Sierra's sake, but for Lauren's own peace of mind. Holding on to anger, Lauren had learned, was like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. She had swallowed enough poison already. Diane reconciled with Lauren slowly, carefully, with the kind of caution that comes from too many broken promises. They met for coffee once a month. They talked about the twins, about the investigation, about the weather. They did not talk about Cole or about Diane's testimony or about the 30-year-old crime that had given Cole his leverage. That secret remained buried. The statute of limitations had long since passed, and Diane's cooperation in the case against Cole had earned her a kind of unofficial immunity. She would never face charges for what she had helped her husband do, but she would live with the guilt. That was clear every time Lauren looked at her. Diane used her remaining money to fund a nonprofit for victims of financial abuse. She called it Second Chances, and Lauren became one of its first advisors. It was not forgiveness, exactly. It was something more complicated than that. It was acknowledgement, understanding. The recognition that Diane had been a victim too, in her own way, trapped in a cycle of control that had started long before Lauren entered the picture. Breaking that cycle was more important than holding grudges. And Lauren herself? Lauren went back to school. She renewed her CPA license. She started a small forensic accounting firm specializing in divorce cases, helping women like herself uncover hidden assets and expose financial manipulation. She called it Mitchell Forensics. The logo was simple. The mission statement was clear. Finding the truth, $1 at a time. Her first client was a woman named Rachel Morgan, who had found Lauren's story in a news article and driven 3 hours to ask for help. Rachel was 42 years old. She had been married for 18 years. She had 3 children and a husband who controlled every aspect of her financial life. "My husband says I am crazy," Rachel said, her hands trembling around a cup of coffee. "He says I am imagining things. He says the money is fine, we are fine, everything is fine. But I know he is hiding something. I can feel it." Lauren looked at this woman, this stranger who had driven 3 hours on the strength of a newspaper article, and saw herself. She saw the fear, the doubt, the desperate hope that someone, anyone would believe her. And she knew exactly what to say. "Let me tell you something someone once told me," Lauren said. "Temporary defeat is not permanent defeat. The first hearing always favors the parent with resources. That is not justice, that is reality." She leaned forward, her voice warm but firm. "But you have something better than his money and his lawyers. You have the truth, and you have someone who knows exactly how to find it." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "You believe me?" Lauren smiled. It was the first time in a long time that the smile reached her eyes. "I believe you," she said, "and more importantly, I am going to prove it." Rachel started crying in earnest then, grateful, relieved, hopeful tears. Lauren handed her a tissue and opened a fresh notebook. The work had begun, 1 year later. The apartment was small, nothing like the sprawling space on West 85th Street that Lauren had once called home. There was no marble foyer, no designer furniture, no floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. But there was sunlight streaming through clean glass. There was the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen and cinnamon rolls warming in the oven. There was a Christmas tree in the corner, not tall or elegant, but decorated with homemade ornaments and strings of popcorn that the twins had helped create. And there was peace. Lauren sat on the floor of the living room, still in her pajamas, watching her children tear into their presents with the kind of joyful abandon that only toddlers can achieve. They were 20 months old now, walking and babbling and discovering the world with vague, curious eyes. Emma, the older twin by 3 minutes, had inherited her mother's dark hair and her father's stubbornness. She was currently attempting to eat wrapping paper, despite Lauren's repeated efforts to redirect her attention. Noah, the younger one, was quieter, more observant, the kind of child who watched everything with an intensity that made Lauren wonder what he was thinking. He had figured out how to unwrap his presents methodically, one corner at a time, while his sister simply tore into hers like a tiny hurricane. They did not remember Cole. They did not remember the cabin or the custody battle or the weeks they had spent away from their mother. They did not remember the shouting or the lawyers or the courtroom where their futures had been decided. To them, this apartment was home. This life was normal. This version of their mother, the one who laughed easily and hugged often and never ever raised her voice in anger, was the only one they had ever known. Lauren intended to keep it that way. She had thought a lot over the past year about what to tell them when they were older, how to explain who their father was and why he was not in their lives, how to answer the inevitable questions about why Grandma Diane cried sometimes when she looked at them, and why Mommy had pictures of herself looking sad and tired and nothing like the woman they knew. She had not figured out the answers yet, but she had figured out something more important. She had figured out that the story she told them mattered less than the life she built for them. Children do not learn from lectures. They learn from watching. They learn from seeing how the adults around them handle conflict and disappointment and fear. Lauren wanted them to learn that it was possible to be hurt and still heal, to be betrayed and still trust, to lose everything and still rebuild. She wanted them to learn that rock bottom was not the end. It was the foundation. And she was going to teach them that lesson, not with words, but with actions, with the life she was building, with the woman she was becoming. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, interrupting her thoughts. A text from Meg. Merry Christmas. Saw the article about your firm in the journal. I am so proud of you. Lauren smiled and typed back. Merry Christmas. Thanks for answering my call at 4 in the morning last year. I would not be here without you. The response came almost immediately. That is what friends are for. Speaking of which, I am billing you for the therapy I needed after reading Cole's financial records. Also, the nightmares. Definitely billing for the nightmares. Lauren laughed out loud, the sound startling Emma into looking up from her wrapping paper feast. Mama, funny, Emma declared, which made Lauren laugh even harder. Noah tilted his head, studying his mother with those watchful eyes, trying to figure out what was so amusing. Your mama is okay now, Lauren told them softly. We are all okay. She set down her phone and looked around the apartment. It was not perfect. The walls still needed painting. The kitchen faucet still dripped. The heating system still made strange noises at 3 in the morning. Though Lauren had learned to think of those noises as the apartment's way of talking to her. But it was hers, paid for with money she had earned herself, one client at a time, one truth uncovered at a time, filled with furniture she had chosen, books she had read, memories that belonged to no one but her and her children. There was a knock at the door. Lauren rose and crossed the room, her heart lifting with anticipation. She had been expecting this visitor. She pulled open the door to find Diane standing on the other side. Cole's mother was carrying a shopping bag filled with wrapped presents and wearing a reindeer sweater that was completely out of character. Her silver hair was loose around her shoulders, softer than the severe bun she usually wore. She looked nervous, hopeful, younger somehow than she had a year ago. Merry Christmas, Diane said awkwardly. I hope I am not too early. I was not sure what time you started opening presents, and I did not want to miss it, but I also did not want to intrude, so I thought maybe I should wait in the car for a while. But then the car got cold, Lauren cut off her rambling by pulling her into a hug. Diane froze, clearly not expecting the embrace. Then slowly she hugged back. You are right on time, Lauren said. Diane entered the apartment and immediately went to the twins, lowering herself to the floor with more grace than a 64-year-old woman should have possessed. Emma, recognizing her grandmother, immediately offered her a piece of wrapping paper she had been chewing on. Thank you, Nana, Emma said solemnly, which was her way of saying, you're welcome. You are very welcome, my darling, Diane replied, accepting the soggy paper with exaggerated gratitude. This is exactly what I wanted for Christmas. Noah, not to be outdone, crawled over and placed a toy car in Diane's lap. Car, he announced, vroom. Diane made vrooming noises while pushing the car around, and both twins shrieked with laughter. Lauren watched from the doorway, something warm expanding in her chest. A year ago, she had been sitting on a bathroom floor staring at a photograph that had shattered her world. She had been alone, terrified, convinced that she was not strong enough to survive what was coming. She had been so wrong, not about the hard parts. Those had been exactly as hard as she had feared, and sometimes harder. There had been moments when she had wanted to give up, moments when the fight seemed pointless, moments when she had wondered if she was strong enough to keep going, but she had kept going anyway. That was the secret no one told you about strength. It was not about never feeling weak. It was about feeling weak and moving forward anyway. Here is what nobody tells you about rock bottom, Lauren thought, watching her children play with their grandmother on Christmas morning. It is not the end. It is the foundation. Everything I built after that moment, my career, my home, my peace, I built on the ruins of who I used to be. And it turns out, ruins make pretty good building materials. Her phone buzzed again. Another text, this one from an unknown number. Happy holidays, Lauren. This is Tommy Reeves, the doorman from your old building. I saw the news about your firm helping that woman recover $2 million from her ex. Just wanted to say I always knew you would be okay. Some people are built to survive. Lauren smiled and typed back, thank you, Tommy, for everything, including the technical difficulties that night. A moment later, his reply arrived. Anytime, Mrs. Mitchell. Anytime. And if you ever need a reference for your firm, I have seen a lot of things in that building. A lot of things people thought nobody noticed. Lauren laughed softly. She made a mental note to follow up with Tommy after the holidays. A doorman who noticed things could be a valuable resource for her work. Then she set down her phone and returned to her children. The morning unfolded the way Christmas mornings should. Presents were opened, cinnamon rolls were eaten, coffee was consumed in quantities that probably were not healthy. Emma tried to eat 3 more pieces of wrapping paper. Noah built a tower out of his new blocks and knocked it down 17 times in a row, laughing harder each time. Diane stayed for lunch. She helped Lauren cook, which mostly meant standing in the kitchen and handing Lauren things while telling stories about her own Christmases as a child, back before she married into the Whitmore family, back before everything got complicated. After lunch, the twins went down for their nap, and Lauren and Diane sat on the couch with cups of tea, watching snow fall outside the window. I want to thank you, Diane said quietly, for giving me another chance. I know I did not deserve it. Lauren considered her words carefully before responding. When I was in the worst of it, she said, when everything had fallen apart and I did not know how I was going to survive, someone told me something I have never forgotten. She said that temporary defeat is not permanent defeat, that the system is not fair, but the truth is still the truth. She turned to look at Diane. You made mistakes, big ones. You stayed silent when you should have spoken up. You helped cover things up when you should have exposed them. Diane flinched, but Lauren continued. But you also came through when it mattered most. You stood up in that courtroom and told the truth, even though it cost you everything. You chose to do the right thing, even though it was 40 years late. Lauren reached over and took Diane's hand. I do not think forgiveness is about pretending the past did not happen. I think it is about deciding that the past does not get to control the future. Diane's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. They sat in silence for a while, watching the snow accumulate on the windowsill. Then Diane said something that surprised Lauren. You know, she said, Cole called me last week. Lauren's hand tightened involuntarily. From prison? Diane nodded. He gets 1 phone call a month. He used this month's call to tell me that he hates me, that I betrayed him, that I am dead to him. I am sorry, Lauren said, and she meant it. Diane shook her head. Do not be. It was actually, she paused, searching for the right word. Clarifying. Clarifying? For years, I told myself that Cole was capable of change, that somewhere inside him was the little boy I raised, the one who used to bring me flowers from the garden and tell me I was the best mommy in the world. I kept hoping that boy would come back. Her voice hardened slightly. But that call, she said, that call made me realize the boy I remembered never really existed. He was always performing, always saying what he thought I wanted to hear, even as a child. She looked at Lauren with clear eyes. I am glad you got the twins away from him. I am glad they will never learn his lessons. I am glad, even though it breaks my heart, that they will grow up without a father rather than with him. Lauren did not know what to say, so she simply squeezed Diane's hand. They would be okay, all of them. Not because the past had been easy, but because they had survived it. That evening, after Diane left and the twins were in bed, Lauren stood at her window watching the city lights twinkle through the falling snow. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, broken, afraid, convinced that she was not strong enough to survive. She thought about the woman she had become, a mother, a business owner, a survivor. She thought about all the women she had helped this year, the clients who had come to her desperate and left with the truth. Rachel Morgan, whose husband had been hiding $400,000 in offshore accounts. Jennifer Walsh, whose ex had been underreporting his income for years. Maria Sanchez, whose partner had put 3 properties in his sister's name to avoid splitting them in the divorce. Each case was different, but the pattern was always the same. Men who thought they were clever, women who knew something was wrong. And Lauren, armed with her forensic accounting skills and her stubborn refusal to accept lies, finding the truth hidden in the numbers. She had built something real, something meaningful, something that helped people. And she had done it on her own terms. The phone rang one more time. Lauren glanced at the screen. Unknown number, she answered anyway. Hello? A woman's voice, trembling and desperate. Is this Lauren Mitchell, the forensic accountant? I read about you in the paper and I did not know who else to call. My husband, I think he is hiding money, and I am afraid, I am so afraid, and I need help. Can you help me, please? Lauren closed her eyes and listened to the fear in this stranger's voice. She thought about all the times she had felt that same fear, all the times she had wondered if anyone would believe her, all the times she had needed someone to say the words she was about to say. Yes, Lauren said firmly, I can help you. Tell me everything. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, a new story was beginning. And Lauren Mitchell, forensic accountant, mother, survivor, picked up her pen and started to write. And that is where our story ends. Not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with a woman who rebuilt herself from the ruins of everything she lost. Lauren Mitchell taught us something important today. Rock bottom is not the end, it is the foundation. You know, I receive messages every single day from people who say these stories help them through their darkest moments. People who are sitting alone at 2 in the morning, wondering if things would ever get better. If that is you right now, I want you to know something. You are stronger than you think, and your story is not over yet. Now, if Lauren's journey touched your heart today, do me a small favor. Hit that like button. It takes 1 second, but it tells me you want more stories like this one. Drop a comment below. Tell me what part of Lauren's story hit you the hardest. I read every single one, and if you have not already, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because next week I have a story that might just break you in the best possible way. Until then, take care of yourself. You deserve it.